Resident Parking Committee of the Neighborhood Council. I want to thank everyone for coming out here tonight, especially Commissioner Tinlin. I know your time is precious, and we do appreciate you coming out here. I also want to thank again Nicole for going around with me on July 29th. I think we got a lot done. It was a good start. And I think the addition to the repainted line on Hanover, as well as the resident parking exempt for the visitor spots in the north end, is a big step in the right direction. Just over the last few months, I've been going around the neighborhood listening to other people's complaints about parking and just trying to capture a few pictures that encompasses some of the major problems that are going on in the north end right now with parking. As of 2010, the council was given this number statistic. There's about 4,000 resident parking permits issued for the north end, and there's estimated to be about 1,500 resident parking spots. I don't know how accurate that figure still is, but I'm hoping with the fact that our visitor parking spots are now for residents, that number, the bottom number, has increased. And then, like I said, as of October 1st of this year, the 2-hour visitor parking spots are now considered full-time parking spots for North End residents, meaning you can park there beyond the 2-hour limit and you don't have to worry about getting a ticket. The exceptions are kind of to the major streets, Commercial Street, Prince Street, Salem Street, as well as Hanover. And I don't know how well you can see that sign there, but this is an example of the new visitor parking signs. Below it, it says accept resident sticker, so it's pretty clear cut. Some of the more difficult things in the north end, I think, for me, is reading signs, especially on Hanover Street. If you're a tourist or even a resident coming in here, it's very tough to understand these signs. So I don't know, I throw it out to the commissioner if he can figure out a better way to simplify some of these signs. People, I think, will have a much easier time than trying to read from top to bottom and figuring out when they can and can't park there and during what hours. One thing I noticed, actually was brought up to me by a fellow resident, was the bike lane. When the bike lane was installed, which I think originally I was opposed to the idea because I thought it would cause more congestion on Commercial Street, but I really do think it's been a good thing for the city. However, during the painting process, some of the signage and spot markers no longer match up. You see the front spot here where it looks like there's an empty spot. However, if you go to the next slide here, there's an arrow that points out and cuts it off right at this sign. So it's basically, there's a full spot in front of the sign. However, the sign says you can't park beyond that arrow. I think that's on 3 or 4 different spots on Commercial Street. I haven't really noticed any other ones. Rink parking, I think, is a huge issue, especially now with the new school there. There's kids that walk there every single day. I see them going from the school to the playground. And when you have cars that are parked with no resident stickers, I don't know what business they have parking there. There doesn't appear to be anything going on in the rink. However, it's the same, 6 or 7 cars parked there every single day. No tickets ever.
This is on the sidewalk, right?
This is on the sidewalk, yeah, thank you.
It's actually DCR property. I'm happy to.
Sure, you can use these and go back. And,
you know what to do? Why don't you go through it, then we can go through it. If
sure,
19% holds up,
okay.
We'll take it.
Again, here's more, parking. And like I said, sometimes they park on both sides, and the kids are forced to walk between them. You get the tour buses on top of that. There's a lot of congestion, and I think especially now with the school there, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. Fraudulent handicap placards. I don't know what the city does to kind of do checks and balances with placards as well as spots, but there seems to be a lot of 18 and 19-year-old kids hopping out of their Escalades, parking in handicap spots in the neighborhood. So, I give it to the city to do more of a crackdown on enforcing placards as well as spots that are in the neighborhood. This issue seems to have resolved itself with the renovation of the basketball court. Last year, this is actually a photo by Matt Conti. Thank you, Matt. It was from January of 2013 last year, and during basketball season, cars would come here from all over the city and park here, and obviously you can't use the basketball court if there's cars there. However, during the renovation, they put up pylons there so cars can no longer park there. However, that created a new problem, and that's the current Nazzaro parking lot basketball court area. People park here. There's no enforcement. I don't know if it's public land, private land. I'm assuming it's private because there's no handicap spots. If it was public or city property, I'm thinking there would have to be handicap spots or at least lines down to show where parking spots are. But people seem to come and go and park here, you know, whenever they want. And then just some other questions have been raised by residents. Sunday is a big issue here for resident parking. People come in from out of the city or out of the North End, especially during feast time or Celtics games or Bruins games, and they take up spots or they park in illegal spots. And I've never seen a parking meter enforcer walking around on a Sunday. So if we get some clarification on whether or not they have people walking around, that'd be great. Commercial vehicles is another big thing. If you walk around the neighborhood during the weekday, you see commercial vehicles in spots. There's been, I don't know if it's unwritten rule or if it's actually something on the books, where commercial vehicles, as long as they have a plate, can park in resident spots. To me, that seems a bit unfair for residents just because of the amount of spots we have. I feel like if you're doing a renovation in the neighborhood or some sort of work, you can go down and get a parking permit like everyone else does, pay the money, and reserve your spot for the work that needs to be done. And then the one issue here that's becoming a growing concern, this was actually brought up by Bill Lane, and it's commercial businesses that are getting issued resident parking spots for part of the time, meaning in front of Thacher, in front of Regina's, there used to be 3 full-time resident parking spots, and now they are partial resident parking spots and partial commercial spots, depending on the hour. We were told that businesses, let me get this right, for $40 per foot per year, a restaurant can get a resident spot converted to a commercial loading spot. For me, this seems like a very slippery slope, just because the amount of businesses that we have in the North End, or someone who wants to create a business just to have a parking spot, it seems like a much cheaper option than to pay $300 a month to park in a covered lot or get a spot in the North End. So those are some of the main issues that I've seen, and I invite you, Commissioner Tinlin, to feel free and use the
I'm not touching the
slideshow. Okay.
Tricia, you can stand up here if you like. That'd be great. Can you go back and
Sure.
we can do it one by one? First of all, good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Tinlin. I'm the Commissioner of Transportation for the city. It's great to be back here again, and Stephen, I thank you for the invitation. You know, I've spent a lot of time in this room on a lot of issues, and it's always great to be back. The one thing I did want to address is my absence in September, and Stephen and I talked about this quite a bit. Now, for those who don't know me, I'm a 25-year public servant, 20 of which has been spent with Mayor Menino. And I've been called a lot of things. And some of them have actually been pretty good, some of them not so much. One thing I've never been called is Commissioner No-Show. And I know the people in this room don't write the headlines that appear in some of the papers. But as a father of 2 young children and a family man, life gets in the way. Sometimes things come up and you can't be where you would like to be. But in that specific instance, Steve and I had a conversation, and I gave him my apologies, and I shared with him as much as I was comfortable with about a personal matter and why I couldn't be here, and told him that we could do one of 2 things. I could send the Deputy Commissioner, or I'd be happy to come in October. So Stephen called, whoever he called me back and said, no, we'd prefer to have you. So I went into that evening thinking that I had done my due diligence and allowed me to attend to the matter at hand, which was much more pressing, and I wouldn't do anything differently, to be perfectly honest with you. So then when you pick up a paper and you refer to it as a Commissioner No-Show and he blew us off, I didn't blow anybody off. I tended my family. I don't apologize for that, but that's the fact. Now, I debated whether or not to bring that up tonight, but I know a lot of people in this room, and I've worked hand in hand with a lot of people in this room on a lot of issues. But like you, my family will always come first to me. I apologize for the inconvenience. If it was avoidable, I would have been here in September. But I like to think that I have a pretty good reputation built on 25 years of showing up and being commissioner, showing up and taking my lumps and moving on and try to make a positive difference, not just in the North End, but in every neighborhood in this city. So with that, would you mind going back to some of those slides, and then we'll have at it? what do we start right at the beginning? We'll start at the good. We might as well do the good, right?
Start with the good hope.
And honestly, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I do think this helps shape the conversation. Why don't you show me some of the pictures that you have? So that was the good, right? Because also on that walk with Ryan and Nicole was Joe Flory, who works on the transportation department, and identifying opportunities where we could create more resident parking in this neighborhood. Because this neighborhood, like a lot of others, when I was a kid, and some of you know this, when I went to high school across the street at Columbus High School, there weren't a lot of cars in these neighborhoods. You'd have a 3-decker in South Boston, my neighborhood, maybe 1, 2, 3 vehicles tops. Now you're looking at 6, 9 people living together who are not related, and everybody wants to bring their own cars. The resident parking program, and the numbers you have are right, it's a free program to try to give somebody the opportunity to park on their street. It is a free program. We have debated in the past, you give the first sticker out for free and charge a certain amount for the second sticker. Try to incentivize people not to bring multiple cars into the city. I like to think, because of things like the bike lanes that we provide, the bike shares, the bike racks, I like to think that we're trying to give people alternative modes of transportation, but so long as we as a society are tied to our cars, this is going to be a continuing problem for us for sure. One stat that I'll give you that nobody appreciates when you're driving around your neighborhood at 10 o'clock at night and you just want to have a parking space to go into your house, is the vehicle ownership, vehicle registration in the city is down 50,000 vehicles in the last 5 years. So that's the registry of motor vehicle numbers. So that's huge, but there's definitely more work to be done. We're not going to be able to build more streets. We're not going to knock buildings down to build more parking. We have to get more people not to choose a car as their primary mode of transportation. Confusing signs, right? The north end for sure. South end, excuse me. Some other areas of the city, you have such a diverse use of your curb space. First floor commercial, residential up above. The commercial have to get their deliveries. The residents need a place to park. And in your commercial district, you also want to create some opportunity for customers to come in to support your local small businesses, right? Nobody wants to get on Hanover Street and see a street of plywood windows. This is a hugely successful area. Our job, and I don't complain about it, but is to try to find that delicate balance. So the top sign is saying it's 2-hour parking, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. so that we give people the opportunity to come in and hit a small business. The arrows to your right are the commercial vehicles. It's a loading zone, starting at 7 a.m. to noon. And we do, believe it or not, sometimes you feel like you have to go to MIT or NASA to figure the signs out, and I respect that, but we do try to keep the message clear and concise so that you don't have 15 signs on one pole, which was a problem that working with this group and Council Lamartina we addressed a few years back. So then at noontime, it becomes 2-hour limit, 2 to 4. Again, trying to support that local business community, get people in and out of there. And then this is obviously near a restaurant, so it becomes the valet parking from 4 to midnight. So what we do is we take blocks of time and try to give that curb use to satisfy that need, certain blocks of time, trying to give everybody a chance to get to the curb. And it's not easy for sure. If we had our druthers, I'd love to see businesses parachute in their goods and not have to bring the trucks from the Whitehead Circle and from the Newmarket area, so that if we could just completely turn it over to the residents. Because I understand. I live over in South Boston. It's extremely frustrating over there to park as well. When I get home tonight, I know I'm not complaining because I'm loving being here. But when I get home tonight, it's going to be difficult to park, and that's part of urban living. Yes,
just a quick question. Sorry,
absolutely. No.
So I think, and I don't know if this is what Ryan was touching on too, but so it's not so much that we don't appreciate that has a multiple use. It's just the complexity of the sign, and I understand that you're reading. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm getting it. Certain signage has to meet an engineering standard. Your message has to be clear and concise, and you try to include the international signs for no parking with the P through it. If there are things that we can do to simplify that and really clarify the message, we're happy to do it. One thing, Steve and I were talking about some of the 2-hour parking, and I was in my office, I said, let me just come over here and take a look at it. And a lot of that stuff is born out of need. And so, especially, not to sound like the you know, what I do is not always about the beauty, but the aesthetics of Hanover Street and the North End as a whole, you know, maybe we should think about, are there different ways to do it to simplify the message and to avoid things that look like a Christmas tree of signs? You know, I'd definitely be open to that.
Tony, before we take, this is about to die, so maybe he can run through the rest of it. It's flashing, so. Next one.
So, I know stopping, as you can see, the pavement marking, what that was, honestly, probably a guy who was lazy in the truck and didn't want to drop a pole. That's on us. That's lazy work. So he would rather use the pole that's existing parked by that blue car as opposed to getting the jackhammer out, drilling a hole, dropping a pole, and saying no stopping from here to that intersection. So that's on us. That has to be fixed. I don't want to sound like the bureaucrat and kick the ball down the road, but I was over looking at the school site because we added some signage for the children showing up, the school zone 20-mile-an-hour signs when school's in session, and I called DCR on that. I said, hey, why do you guys have all your trucks parking here? So I put Commissioner Murray on notice. That's DCR property. I can't write a ticket on it, and I can't tow. Jack Murray, who is the new commissioner of DCR, he's a good guy. He gets it. I educated him a little bit about now that you have the school there. The ice skating rink's going to start humming up again. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense for these cars to hop the curb, drive on a sidewalk to get there, because those folks, I assure you, they're not all working in the rink, and some of those cars are nice. Do you see them? Like Mercedes? Yeah, the same guy every day. And so somebody's parking there and probably going down to the DCR office building on Causeway Street. So I did flag that for him, but you know, we'll follow up, and Stephen, I'll work with you on maybe a joint type of letter to say, hey, you know, it's probably not the best place to be. This is the bane of my existence. My father-in-law, who was an all-scholastic basketball player, who since passed away up at Southie High, had a tumor in his back that put him in a wheelchair. His biggest lease on life was his handicapped accessible van. He would go out to Castle Island just about every day, and state police would let him park on the sidewalk because people would be parked in the handicapped spot, put their placard up, and go for a jog around Castle Island. You can't make this stuff up. What we do is, you know, we're in the ticket writing business, right? So if we observe it, we don't even have the ability by law to go up and say, you don't look handicapped to me, because they're enforcement officers. A Boston police officer would, somebody, the state police would, but we can't challenge anybody on the curb. So what we do is we'll note the placard number in the plate number of the vehicle and refer it to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and in some cases, the Inspector General's office. I will tell you, the last Herald expose, which was like the fourth one in 10 years, and it's just one of those problems that some days you feel like you're just shoveling sand against the tide. I had a conversation with Rachel Capralian, who's the registrar for the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and you know, she's a really good public servant, she's a really good person, and she's had it as well. So we're gonna be meeting in due course to figure out what we can do more. The reporter on that, who I spoke to, he kept talking about, well, that's lost revenue for the city because of the parking meters. I don't really care about that. I shouldn't say I don't care about the revenue because Matt Conti's taping this, because I do care about the revenue, but it's just not the right thing to do. All right, somebody who's an able-bodied person taking one of these parking spaces from somebody who relies on it, like my father-in-law, anybody in here with a loved one with a placard or a plate, you know, you're inadvertently destroying their quality of life, and it's absolutely disgusting. So hopefully you'll see more attention. You'll see more attention on the city level, and we have been doing it. I can give you the stacks of reports that we send up to the RMV and to the Inspector General's office. You know, we would like to see a little bit more follow-up, to be frank. I was asking Nicole who owns that, so I don't know if that's a Parks Department playground or, I'm sorry? But he can lock, they can lock the gate now, so. And
Yes.
actually Tracy and I come in that way, so, and I saw the bollards up, and it's funny because my daughter plays basketball upstairs here, and I've never once parked there, first of all, because I park at City Hall and I walk over. But I noticed that nobody was parked there tonight, and I was thinking to myself, oh.
Well, they just put the bollards out at the court.
Yeah.
A young 18-year-old kid came in here last year, complained about it, and it picked up a little traction.
Good.
The kid got the whole court resurfaced and the balls put up. I will say this, it's not easy for Kyle to have visiting teams come into the North End and park. So sometimes on a Friday night, you have 10 kids on a visiting team, all 10 parents come, and there's really nowhere for them to park. And they can technically park in a parking lot, but in fairness to Kyle, he tries to accommodate them. Previous to the bollards being put up, though, it was abused a little. They were parking into the court and all that other stuff, so they just put the bollards up. But yeah, Kyle has the lock, so that's BCYF's gate, but it's maintained by the Parks Department. Am I right, Nicole?
So since the balls have been up and he's locking the gate, is the problem gone away?
For the most part, but people are still, people still get in and out. So.
Because if Kyle, if you wanted,
if elderly
even though it's not our property, if you wanted to call us, I'd be happy to send somebody over and pull somebody out of it. If it became a problem, but I wouldn't want to do it and have it be Kyle's car, you know what I mean? Kyle would never let my daughter play basketball here again.
If I may, Mr. President.
Yes, you may.
And I know that it's become an issue, people parking in there, but this is our community center. We do have a lot of families that maybe don't live in this community that
Sure.
participate in our program.
Or St. John's, their kids
You know,
come
the
here, live
kids
in
come
Beacon
here.
Hill.
Gate of heaven.
It is nice to have some type of parking because there are basketball games that are going on, as you know. I think it would be a little harsh to eliminate it totally.
It's not all day and all
It's
night
not all
parking.
day, right.
Just in and
I
out.
Trust
think
me,
my
I'm
issue
happy
is
to
that
do
if it's
nothing.
gonna be open use, it should be open use for everyone, whether it's someone who's playing here, someone's family coming in for the weekend.
On the other hand, people visit the North End all the time, okay? And when you visit a city, when I visit a city driving, I park my car in the parking lot. If I find that there are no meters or there's no place to park. It's also used as a playground, so we have children there. So having it being two things, it can be a dangerous thing. It's either one or the other, but if it was marked as parking, children would know, okay, this is parking. When I'm playing here, there might be cars coming in and out of. Again, the folks who come in to visit the neighborhood should park their car in the parking lot.
But no, I agree. I'm not talking about folks visiting neighbors,
No, visit in the neighborhood, but when you come to an event here, when you go to Foxborough, you go watch a game, it's a different league, you pay for parking, okay? When you come to watch your kids over here, you should pay for parking. That's it.
So through the chairman, I will do nothing until I hear direction from the, you might want to talk to the folks from, community centers or Boston Centers for Youth and Families and, whatever we decide. Do you want me to get through this and whatever Stephen wants me to do? We do not work on Sundays. We don't write parking tickets on Sundays. We shut down.
Why is that?
Because it's always been looked at as, frankly, people need a break. Around the churches, you get a lot of activity. We've toyed with the idea of putting on Sunday shifts. I'll tell you that, Mayor Menino, what we had done at the time was we turned the city over to the police department for parking enforcement. Captain Hasson, Jimmy Hasson is a good guy. I'll talk to him about that. Not to say that we couldn't put some resources over here periodically on a Sunday. As you know, when people write a bunch of parking tickets, they're making up for whatever the cost would be associated with the overtime. But, I'd rather talk to Sergeant Lima and Captain Hasson and maybe see if we can come up with some type of joint understanding or joint plan for
I
that.
think it's everybody knows that, and I've had that situation where
Well,
someone
everyone
would be
definitely knows
parking, and they'd say it's Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'd say, we live here on Sundays too. They just, the valet know it, the valet really, that's another story.
City businesses take over the
Yeah,
spots.
and it's not just here. I mean, it's a growing issue throughout the city, and we should probably be reassessing.
It's still revenue.
Yeah, well, but it's not, honestly, the revenue is one thing, but it's making sure that you park in your street is really the ultimate goal, right? So, I mean, that's something that we should probably reassess moving forward.
Sorry.
The commercial vehicles, as we talked about before, I'll use Pizza Regina as an example. Our role is to try to balance the needs of everybody who wants to use the curb space. So on a small street such as Thacher, when they requested the commercial vehicle space, we told them, hey, it can't be an all-day thing and an all-night thing. So we asked them what time they got their deliveries and how many days a week. And so we settled on the hours from 8 to noon, Monday through Saturday. Because they are off the beaten path, they get a lot of deliveries. I would rather see a truck in a loading zone where I would argue that it belongs, as opposed to double parked or blocking the street and removing all access for other people. So it is not a policy, it's on a case-by-case basis. In this particular one, I did have a conversation with Councilor Martina about it as well. And, the need was so prevalent that, again, I don't want somebody getting a soda, beer delivery, or pizza crust, or whatever they get, and park in the middle of the street, not letting anybody by. So it just seemed like it made sense to give them some time as opposed to creating an unsafe condition.
Does anyone,
Yeah.
we take questions from the council first, and then I'll let you guys do.
I just think the last point was commercial vehicles parking during the day in resident spots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The regulation is that commercial vehicles, the plumber, the electrician who are guarding a house nearby, they are exempt from resident parking for up to 3 hours. So if your hot water heater blows and you have to call a plumber in, so they can't come to City Hall, they can't get a permit, they can't put signs up 48 hours in advance, it's to try to accommodate that use. It used to be, you know, as bad as you may feel that it is now, I mean, it used to just be an unregulated, commercial vehicles were exempted, be there all days, lawyers with commercial plates, and it was really, not to pick on lawyers, but it was, let's pick on lawyers. It was really, it was really out of control. So we went to a regulation that would be a commercial plate with the lettering of a company on the body of the car in contrasting colors to try to make it stand out that they would have to abide by our rules. So if you notice on those commercial vehicle signs, it will say commercial vehicles, I believe the language is as defined by Boston Transportation Department. Because the Registry of Motor Vehicles they designate a commercial vehicle just with the license plate, and a lot of people getting that to get the tax incentive and the insurance break, but they were using it as their own personal car and they were exempt from the resident sticker. So we had now have a regulation that it's a 3-hour limit, and also you need to have contrasting lettering on the sides of the car, 3 inches in height for one line, and I think it's 1.5 inches as you go down. But having said that, you know, if we're seeing more and more on that over here, I'm happy to put some more bodies over here to overtime those vehicles, because what we find, especially around construction sites, when we show up, we start overtiming the vehicles, coming back after the 3 hours and tagging them, you change that behavior pretty quickly. So there is certain locations, please share them with, and I should have pointed out, I'm sorry, but my Director of Constituent Services, Tracy Gagnatos, kept me company over here tonight as well, so feel free to share anything you need with Tracy and myself.
Anyone in council?
Check that.
Let's start with George.
Yeah, when it comes to commercial parking, particularly in that area you're talking about, we don't know, we have a lot of businesses in the neighborhood and everybody has a need to have a 16-wheeler in front of their store one time or the other. But we do have a lot of companies cart the product around and they use your designated areas and it seems to work. You know, it's kind of like when you walk around in the morning on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever, they're delivering their goods. And you have the guys, companies are going creative, they have the cars that are electric, so they're moving their stuff around. Regina's is in the corner, in a little pocket of the north end. There's very few other businesses there that are using the same space to deliver. You know? We did take those parking spots, we're taking them 6 days a week from 8 to 12.
7 to 12.
From 7 to 12 to deliver to one, to deliver to one business. I think that that's one of the issues that many of the folks that live in that part of the neighborhood may have. I mean, we do have a shortage of parking. We do have a lot of people parking. We have a lot of people visiting. All good things. Everybody can afford to have a car, and people are coming to visit us. And we have deliveries coming, so we're doing business. But in that case, in particular, we do have companies like Cisco, companies like Kakari, companies like Musco Foods, park their cars in the designated areas and work from there during those times. And it seems to work because Hanover Street seems to be pretty orderly during the peak delivery days, which are usually beginning of the week and end of the week.
But they're not there, they're still there after 12 o'clock.
Well, that's something that the Commissioner, I'm sure, knows. I get a lot of tickets from that, don't you, Commissioner? People that overstay their visit. But during the time that's available, it works well. And, you know, obviously, the folks that have the company truck out there delivering and are late, I'm sure they pay the tickets knowing that they overstayed, so that's not an issue. But again, other companies are carting their stuff around. I find it interesting that we have one company that can cart their stuff around. You know, no pun intended to the folks at Regina, but I do see the point to the neighbors there. The other thing too, Commissioner, the frustration that has built up here over the months that we've waited for our signage to be changed, and then with the aftermath of not being able to make it to the meeting, which was never expressed to us as a personal issue, was where those comments came in. We waited a long time to talk about parking.
The day that Stephen called me and asked me to come, I said I'd be there. So
No,
I don't know about the trying to get
I-
me here stuff, and I know what your
I
codes were.
understand.
I make myself available.
No, I understand, but if I was a public servant, I wouldn't take offense when my people
You
call
would
me.
take offense when
No,
someone says he blew us off and we've been trying to get
Well,
him
that's
forever
the
to be
feeling,
here?
that's the feeling we had, Commissioner. That's the feeling we had, all right?
See, but if I was in a constituent group, I'd try to get the information before I pass judgment. You don't know me. I don't know you. I'm
You
sure
don't
that you're a
know
good
me.
guy.
Yeah, I'm
Right,
sure
but
you're
I
a
would
good
not
guy.
judge you based upon one night
But
out
I
of a
wouldn't- let me tell you
25-year
something. I
career.
wouldn't walk into a meeting and set the record straight in that fashion either, okay?
Well, that's
I'm
where
sorry.
you and I differ.
But no, we don't differ, we seem to agree, because you set the record straight, I'm trying to set the record straight too, okay? But we did wait for our signs for a long time. These are
Steve,
issues
am I
that-
responsive?
These are, but this is.
Thank you.
Yeah, but Steve is not the only person on this council, and the fact
He's
that
the
he's the
president,
president. Yeah, but he doesn't speak for the rest of us, sir. I'm
The
speaking
president
for
speaks for the rest
myself.
of the council?
No, he does not speak for me. I'm speaking for myself right now, and I'm not speaking for Steve either, okay? But what we're saying is that we've had a lot of frustrations with parking here. That's the reason why the tension has built up over time, okay? And we waited for signs for a very long time, and these are issues that are concern to us. Mind you, too, we're losing parking for bike lanes, we're losing parking for improperly marked streets, and we've lost parking also for a lot of the new regulations on how the fire trucks get around. Construction, we've had a terrible September with the moving trucks coming in. We had pretty much the whole neighborhood move out and the whole neighborhood move in, where a lot of the residents had to go and pay for parking, while the city was granting permits after permit after permit. We had Prince Street was completely blocked off for moving trucks. Salem Street was completely blocked off for moving trucks, you know? So those are issues of concern, you know what I mean? Concern to us, I mean, you know, I'm sure we weren't meaning to offend you, but some of those issues offend us, and it's difficult to live in a neighborhood where you can park. We did have more parking where we had the above area, we have underneath parking, as you remember, I'm sure. And that control a lot of the flow of people that come in. We want people to continue to come in. Parking is an issue. You know, we would love to be able to use more parking on the greenway, where you have street parking on both sides, maybe some more signage for the neighborhood. We would love to see, if we're gonna take parking away from bike lanes, how can we compensate and find parking in other streets or in other areas where resident parking can take place? We also would love to know, if we're gonna be taking so much space for fire truck, is there any way that we can create additional parking in the surrounding perimeter of the north end to alleviate a little bit the issue of resident parking? It's not a bad problem to have a neighborhood that's growing in interest, people visiting and people wanting to live here and becoming a little bit more affluent. We have more families, we have people with cars, but it would be nice to compensate a little bit for what we're losing by trying to get something. Thank you.
I have a question about 585 Commercial Street. That parking lot there is empty at night, and I know.
Which one is that? I'm sorry.
585 Commercial Street.
Who owns it, do you know?
It's the new Eliot School, upper school.
Oh, the other school's lot?
Yeah, and I know across the city, usually at night, that becomes resident spots. But that's right next to the garden too, so I was wondering if there's something you could do to use that, you know, for garden parking and raise money for the school, or some sort of, you know, some sort of resident.
I think it's a good idea. The way that it works in other neighborhoods of the city is that a community organization, community group, elected official will approach the headmaster or principal of the school. And as long as the vehicles are out before a certain hour, before the school day starts and the teachers arrive, they've cut deals that way. That's an excellent idea. I'm not familiar with a lot of how many vehicles are over, but.
Probably about 40 or so.
The old Romney headquarters, that building, you know that story.
The other question I have is, it seems like the new project.
But if we can be helpful in that process, just let me know.
The new buildings coming in North Station, Commercial Street, and Causeway Street.
Yeah.
Seems like they don't have parking requirements the way the other buildings have traditionally. Is that a change?
It's not a change. The rule of thumb has always been 0.75, which, you know, per unit, or so it would be, you know, 75 spaces for 100 unit when you look at it that way. That has always been a jump-off number. Some developers will come in with less than that. Some developers will come in above that. Usually, what you'll see is if there is, like the Causeway Street area, if the development is going to be around an area that is close to public transit, they'll try to come in under. But all developers then have to go through a community process, and the community process will decide what that number is going to be. You know, we feel that that is a good number, especially in areas that have transit. Because as George was talking about, the more you build, the more they're gonna come. The one problem that I've always had with private development with off-street parking is it's great to charge $700,000 for the condo, but they also want to charge an extra $75,000 for the parking space. So you get people that will say, why would I pay for that if I can get a resident parking sticker and compete with everybody else on the street? And it's a free program. We've had some success of taking large residential properties with large off-street parking and eliminating them from the resident parking program. So we've had some success with that and saying, I'm sorry, you're just not eligible, and that's worked out well for us. But the whole mindset of things such as bike lanes, alternative modes, is to keep the vehicles out. You know, because you're right, you know, these walk-ups on Hanover Street, Salem Street, Palmetto Street, they may have, when we were all younger and I had a lot more hair, might have had 2 or 3 vehicles assigned to them, and now they have 8, 10. It's insane. You know, so how do you incentivize people not to bring a car into the city? It's a lot of things, right? It's things that I mean, Menino has worked on. I don't think he gets enough credit on it because maybe he wasn't as loud as people would have liked. But that Mayor-elect Walsh is talking about, which is more reliable later public transit service. You know, if you want people to leave their vehicles, not to buy a vehicle, right? Again, 50,000 vehicles down in 5 years, that's a huge number. But again, that doesn't mean anything if you're the one circling the block looking for the space. But if you want people not to bring a car into the city, you have to get them around somehow. And that makes it a walkable city, that makes it an alternative mode city, things such as bicycle lanes, bike accommodations like hubways so that people don't feel the need to be tied to their car, and give them things so if they need the car on the weekend because they want to go someplace, jump in a zip car or do something else other than bringing the car in, paying for the gas, paying for the insurance, the taxes. You know, when people stop and do the math, it's beside me why anybody would want to own a vehicle who absolutely doesn't need one.
I have a question
Yes.
about the signage, that very confusing pole.
Christmas tree.
The Christmas tree, right. So instead of having 3 different signs up, is it possible to just have one sign saying, no parking from this hour to this hour, valet parking from this hour to this hour, residential parking from this hour to this, on one sign, so that someone can just go down the list and say,
I
okay,
think that
what
was
time
one
is it?
sign blank, wasn't
That
it?
was one
Right.
sign.
Yeah, that was one sign blank that you saw.
With
But
all
we-
those
yeah,
twisted
because
and
it's-
arrows and.
You know, you have to use red if it's a regulation, you have to do green if it's parking. This goes back to the engineering standards. But, I mean, you bring up a good point. I'd love to be able to simplify them. You know, I mean, nothing, you know, I'm actually over here quite a bit. And there's nothing worse than when you see somebody looking at it and you're like, you know, and I'll go up and I'll say, you know, here's what it means. You know, but,
It looked like it was 4
Yeah,
different
I agree.
signs, you
That's
know?
a nice-
So if it was just on one sign and it was, people are gonna get out and read it anyway, so.
No, I
it's not
agree
like
with
you can
that.
say that it's too small print because they're staring up at it anyway. And I
think-
know I have too, and I'm not quite sure what it says, but if it just says it on each
a
line.
little more clearly and
Just
more
in one
defined with
sign.
the hours, starting with the hours.
Right,
You know, I
it just
think-
seems like it would be a simpler way to do it.
It sounds like a nice project for some of the engineers to try to redesign something and make it simple, and, you know, maybe we could do some type of pilot over here if we can design something that meets our legal requirement, but makes it easier to
And
understand.
then the other thing about signage is, and somebody said it earlier, when there's a huge event or when somebody's moving in or.
The paper signs,
The
right?
paper
Oh,
signs,
yeah.
okay, so now the time is up, somebody else comes along and they wrap their sign on top of their
Right.
sign, and then somebody else comes and adds it, and so, you know, this September, there were like 3 or 4
Yeah.
signs saying you can't park here from this time to this time, from this time to, but nobody goes back and takes the old signs down.
Only if they're moving in, never when they're moving out.
Right,
Yeah.
so what happens, I mean, like, there's signage, and then they get ripped, and then it's a mess, and then it's all bled through, and the streets look terrible, because there's signs all over.
I agree. Actually, I think Nicole and I, one of our walks on Hanover Street, I
Yeah.
flipped my lid and I started taking some
Yes.
down, and then I called my guys and said, I want people over here. That's ridiculous. And what you shouldn't do is don't get to the point of you're so frustrated because there are 15 signs on it. If you call either my office, the Maze 4500 line, you call Nicole, it takes a crew 15 minutes both sides of the street to tear those down. And feel free to do it yourself. And if the dates aren't valid, just take them down and throw them in the
But
trash.
here's the thing, like on Fulton
Yeah,
Street, they were doing some work on North
And they
Street.
changed the dates.
And, no, and they were doing some work on North Street, and there was some big delivery in there. They put signs up and down Fulton Street on every single pole with tape
that big
wrapped
tape,
around,
yeah.
and I can't get at them,
Right.
and it was done by the city, because it was some sort of, it was just something. And it's on every single pole, and they've been there for like 2 weeks now, and the
they're
dates
still
are all, they're still there. They use that big plastic tape,
Yep,
and
that
you just
clear-
can't even get it down now.
Why don't you come up with a deposit for the sign? So
Yeah.
when you take
You
up
know
the
what?
spot, you put your
That's what
sign
we-
up for the.
return the sign and you get your deposit
And you
back.
get your $50 back.
We had floated that to the city, actually it has to go through the city council. And one of the things that you hear from some of the real estate, and it's a great idea, and it's one that you know, we definitely, we should pursue it a little more vigorously, is, because some neighborhoods, because the frustration of all the signs, they'll tear them down, and the people say, hey, my moving truck showed up, my signs were down, I still need my deposit back. And so we've talked to other cities about it, but incentivizing people to take the signs down is.
And the other thing that might help you do too is monitor whether or not those people are done with their moving, you know what I mean? And you have, okay, we had that person move here, they moved on this address on a certain day, we had a truck there. The other issue that you have is you have multiple trucks.
Oh, for sure.
Pulling permits to the same spot, and they're being granted the permit to the same spot. So if there's a database where you say, okay, we blocked off 7th Street from 130 to 135.
Believe it or not, we do have that. We do have a database, and the movement, not just here, but in other neighborhoods, have become so dramatic that once the first truck shows up, if they're not right where they're supposed to be, it messes everybody else up, so they're not in their spot and they're not in their spot. But again, it goes back to, you know, trying to, it's like herding cats, right? You know, so we're trying, we know that those 3 days of moving weekend, 4 days in some areas, it's gonna be hugely problematic. We put on extra enforcement officers, tow trucks, Boston police, to try to keep it as safe as we can, knowing that, you know, this neighborhood is gonna come under siege. My neighborhood, the South End, Alston, Brighton, you know, when you're welcoming, and it feels like 1 million kids, I don't know what the number is, but, you know, you try to, as best you can, and, you know, the whole goal is just to maintain public safety. Let the trucks unload and then go back in and clean it up after.
I found that this year, most of my neighbors had to take their car and put it in the parking lot,
Yeah.
pay the $30 for the
Yeah.
night, because there was nowhere to put a car. It was, you know, you get out of your car, it's similar to the street cleaning too, you know, when you look at, for example, Tuesday, the second Tuesday street cleaning that we just had, there are so many streets that are being cleaned that there is obviously, once you play that musical chair, there's no more parking spots. So the streets need to be clean. But what do you do with your car? Where do you put it?
But I guess what, you know, and not to be argumentative about it, but, you know, we're asking people to move their car on a street 8 hours a month so that we can get it clean. And this neighborhood has really, you know, been kind of the, you know, ground zero of trying to find that right balance, what they should trash pickup be, what they should street cleaning be. You know, but if you're not gonna get the cars away from the curb, I mean, it's useless. And you can't just do one block, because then you'll never get the entire neighborhood done.
It's just a very long window, 4 hours for it.
Which is why, you know, we try to do it during the day when hopefully, in this area, because of the readiness or availability of public transit, you probably don't get a lot of people to jump in their car to go to work. But that's why, you know, we try to do it during the day and do the best we can, is the volume of people parked who are residents are less. For example, if you saw the tickets that we write, and every year the number of tickets that we write, when we start the program in April, you know, there's a lot of tickets, a lot of tows. And you see that number decline. But on the flip side of that is, a lot of it is people who don't live in the neighborhood. You know, people who are sneaking in there on the visitor parking, when we talk about the visitor parking, that kind of thing, who didn't even look at the street cleaning sign. But we write a lot less tickets as the program goes on, entering into November. I think you guys have it till December, right?
Mm-hmm.
Into December than you did back in April. Or do you guys start in March?
A month on both ends. I'm gonna take us some questions from the audience, and then we have to move on. I thought it was gonna be a short meeting. Bill Lane, name and where you live, Bill, just so.
Yeah, I'm Bill Lane at 10th Avenue Street. Thanks for your clarification about September meeting. I do appreciate that very much. Before I get to my main point, very briefly, you know how the MBTA had a competition for their new signage? They awarded the new design to the designer. I bet you there's a bunch of industrial design schools here in Boston who'd love to be asked to compete.
That's a good idea.
My main point is, I've been sort of harping on this problem at Regina that I think is a bigger problem. I live right across from there, so it does affect me directly.
Okay.
I think Regina, got too much space for too many hours.
Okay.
I also think that it used to work
Fair.
well. We used to park on the curb and the trucks parked next to us. Now the trucks park on the curb, we park next to them, but we're more ticketed now that we double park. We didn't used to get ticketed at all. I could double park for 3 hours, and I used to grow into that habit.
Don't tell me
Now I've
that.
been growing back from the habit. Huh?
Don't tell me that.
I know. But, so I think, but more than that, I don't like the fact that there wasn't a process here that asked us to engage. Because I think those of us in that triangle, Ryan used to be one of them, he knows that square very well, a lot of us do, Danny does, a lot of us do. It's a very dense, we've got Little North Margin,
Very familiar.
Thacher, and we're all crammed in there, very high, tall buildings. My building, the Vermont building, has a lot of people. Many of them don't have cars. I think a process would have helped us accept it better, because we would have felt like we contributed to how many hours a day, how many days a week, and how many curb feet. I would love to see the city, and it's probably starting from your department, because it falls directly under you, maybe institute a public process for major curb takings. And I would say more than one commercial space. I know one truck is longer than a vehicle, so I'd say more than one commercial space should be kicked to the community level for at least a meeting or two to hash out those. I think the time could still be massaged. I think it's too many hours. 30 hours
I
a week
appreciate
is
that.
a lot.
I appreciate that. We'll do that. The one thing I would say is, when it comes to a competing need of residential and commercial, right? You don't usually get, in my experience, you seem like a very reasonable man, right? So if I were to convene a meeting of the folks in your building and say, hey, this restaurant is double parking trucks on Thacher Street, it's causing a problem, we can't have it, here's what we're thinking about. But there are some areas of the city that we will go to that will say, absolutely not, we don't care if the place goes under, I don't care that it's been there for 100 years. So it is striking that balance. The point and process is well taken. And I'm happy to go back and speak to the folks over at Regina and figure out exactly what the needs are, as opposed to what we gave. Because at the same time, I'm not naive enough to think that every business is really telling us exactly what they need, as opposed to what they want.
I think the 10:30 is probably the outside time. We see it, especially on the weekends. We're home on, we look right down to the square and hear the thump of the kegs being thrown. And it stops about 10:30. I think probably every day.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Two things here. One with valet. I had an argument with one of the valet guys last night. Boss, he wouldn't pull his car up 4 feet so I could park. Meanwhile, the sign is down about yours because they're doing construction. And I knew he was way over. He wouldn't move the car to park, to let me park. It was Monday, Tuesday nights, cold, it's 8:30. And then I used the F word. He said he definitely ain't gonna do it because I used the F word. So that's that. That's it. Is there any way meter maids can park guys who,
Did they
not
use the
supposed to be
F word?
parked in that spot?
Did they use the F word at Leisure What, though?
I sure did. And a few more times than I left. But anyway, I took pictures and he apologized, but he was real condescending. Anyway, he was wrong. Anyway, can meter maids park? Those spots are primarily for cars to drop off.
Correct.
They park there. We all know that.
Right.
Can meter maids tag?
Absolutely.
Oh, I don't.
If they do actually. So
There's always,
No,
you'll
they-
always see
they-
cars in front of those spots.
So
That's
we'll-
why they do business on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. And second, okay.
Is there a unit that kind of, you've been
There
seeing
is,
guys all
it's
the
us
time,
in Boston Police, where the transaction time, I think we give 10 minutes for valet, so we can overtime.
They're brutal.
Okay.
Second thing is, why, the safety's a big issue. Like they took away shorter spots so fire trucks can go, that's mainly. Why do you tow primarily for street cleaning, but they won't tow for someone's in a tow zone? They'll never tow, they'll tag them, but if a fire truck cannot make that turn and...
Anytime you see somebody on like that for one of those emergency vehicle access restrictions, if you call 911, they'll either call us if we're on.
I call them, they tag, I call.
Yeah, and we tag them as well. The difference is in street cleaning, that is a private vendor working for the Public Works Department. The Transfer Station Department, we tag, they tow. So you'll have a fleet dedicated for that purpose. With the Transportation Department, we'll have on, say, 35 trucks on the day covering the entire city. So we'll get to it eventually, but we do encourage people to call 911 and then the district can send out a private tow response. But it's really about, trying to get their own vehicles still. But where is that location you're most concerned with?
Everywhere.
Okay, all around. No, that's all.
There's a spot on it right on Cooper Street. And the street
Daytime, nighttime?
narrows. And I talked to, what's his name, he had a sign put up, no parking. But they always talk to him that once ago. We had a fire on Cooper Street about a year and a half ago. And if there was a car parked there where there usually is, and sometimes no ticket, I always call when I see it. The fire would have spread further because the truck would have never made it down. Trucks could barely make it down. It just narrows the street.
The
There's a
reason-
spot where that one car parks and it narrows the street.
And the reason we did that is Bowen, you might remember it, is Bowen Street over in South Boston, very small side street. 8-year-old Caitlin Orr perished in the fire because the fire trucks couldn't get to her. Truth be told, Caitlin Orr, my wife is an occupational therapist in the public schools, and Caitlin Orr is one of her students. And it was born out of that tragedy that we started to do things like public safety corner restrictions. So I'm happy to have our people step it up and talk to Captain Hasson.
The sign he put up really doesn't help. They're still
Look,
back.
I tell people all the time, unless the sign's gonna jump off the pole and write somebody a ticket and tow that car, it's up to us to do the enforcement. Thank you.
Any, okay, Matt, just a couple more, then we gotta.
Yeah, just on the hazmat truck issue, Commissioner, I showed you some pictures I took today because I knew you were coming.
Yeah.
And your office, especially Julie Gooley, worked tirelessly with the public safety side, and Mary Alfano, the late Mary Alfano, took the lead from the council. And to reinstate the ban, I thought it was a great victory. So
Thank you.
2 questions for you, because I feel like
Sure.
we're losing ground that we fought so hard for because of the daily ongoing violations of the ban on Cross Street, North Washington Street, and Atlantic Avenue that go on. And can your office help us
Absolutely.
with some of the enforcement? I know that you're
You
not
show
an
me the
enforcement
picture,
office.
I'll talk to
and,
Commissioner, the interim police commissioner Evans tomorrow. Lieutenant Mead, I don't know if you met him.
I don't know.
He's a good guy. He's the Bureau of Field Services, Special Operations. He has no love for the hazmat truckers. He'd be happy to come down and step it up.
And the second question, is your office still, can we still work on the nighttime ban? If I remember, the public safety study still showed significant risk at night.
I think we did a heck of a job on proving that it should be 24/7 ban. I think we showed that beyond any doubt. The state made their ruling. Yeah, can you work with us? Of course you can. But I think that through Aaron's office and it was an enormous. Aaron Michaelowicz, Anthony Petroselli, Council Lomatina, and Tom were enormous advocates for getting what we got. But as you know, and the mayor was clear with, he still says that the nighttime, allowing it at the nighttime should be reconsidered. I will tell you this, that we did what no other city in the country did, including Washington, D.C., which was to have a restriction during a certain hours to begin with. They tried to do this in Washington, D.C. You talk about targets of opportunity, and they weren't successful. And we were, because of the work that this community did, working with our 2 outside consultants that we had. Why we didn't get the nighttime, it seems probably more of a little bit of a political decision than it was of a data-driven decision. But anything that we could do to be helpful.
Okay, I'll contact
Can
you.
I ask a quick question on that too? I live on the Cross Street area where the loaded trucks drive at night. The speed that they're
Yeah.
going at is insane. There's no speed signs. And maybe there should be a sign particularly for those trucks to keep in mind. They're coming down real fast. There's nobody on the road, they're in a hurry, and they're coming down with those, petrochemical trucks, whatever it may be, flying down. And there's areas where the street and the building, particularly on Stillman Place, the corner of Stillman Place and Cross Street, where there is 2.5 feet between the building and the truck, and they're flying down. So that's something
I'll
that
follow up.
maybe signs to particularly, the hazmat trucks better than that.
One more question, this gentleman right here. Just your name and.
Barry Greenstein, 44 Prince Street. Just a quick question. So with the valets, they constantly, especially on Saturday, Saturday nights when they're busy, they'll, instead of going and properly turn around, they'll illegally do a U-turn and clog up the intersection. Whose responsibility is that to get them to stop?
I'll talk to the police department. Once the vehicle's moving, it's then a moving violation, so it's a Boston Police Department. We have a really good relationship with those guys as relates to overall valet enforcement. So I'm hearing it. I'm hearing the valet issues, and I'll talk to Captain Hasson and Commissioner Evans and see what we can do, because we have, you know, we try to go to a holistic approach, right? Have the transportation department write the tickets, writing the valet parking violations that go against their permit. We have a hearing at the last Friday of every month where we have the valet providers come in with the licensed premise, and we go through it that way. If it reaches a certain level, we can give them a licensed premise violation, which goes against their liquor license. So we have a lot of tools in our toolbox from the last time that we completely revamped our valet policies, procedures, and enforcement. So we have more teeth now than we've ever had before, and I'm happy to use some of those teeth over there.
Trends are out of control.
I mean,
Don't swear when you see them.
along that, just a similar note too, is just as they clog up the intersections, another issue with the intersections is people not knowing the neighborhood and consistently running red lights, and just there being, I don't know if it's
So
necessarily.
if you don't know the neighborhood, you say, oh, I must be able to run that late?
No, they just.
I'm saying, yeah, I know, they're looking at all the
They're
restaurants.
looking around and.
Yeah, there's a lot of eye stimulation, for sure.
Yeah, and then I, I'll tell someone, you're running a red light, I'm trying to cross, and they'll yell at me
Yeah.
for whatever reason, but there seems to be no enforcement in terms of intersections.
The Hanover street lights are on the side of the street.
Right, I know, because the street's so narrow. Yeah.
They might want to be above the side. A lot of people don't see them.
Mass downs.
You know, so you have, three directions going if you wish. And the lights, you see them if you're from the neighborhood because they're on the side of the street. They maybe need to be a little above the street, so because they go right by them. There's a lot of traffic is the red line there for the Freedom Trail. is
One
there
last
too, so-
thing, maybe a
You're
light,
talking to the wrong guy, you have to go through the chairman.
a light at the end of Frank Street maybe, because it's backed up like all the way down past Salem Street.
Put a signal at Prince Street?
Yeah. I'm not sure what the process is for that.
You just started it. Honestly, it's vehicle and pedestrian counts dictate whether or not it meets the federal mandated, what they refer to as warrants, to put in a traffic signal. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you. We have one more thing on the agenda I think we consider all day.
I'd be happy to stay on.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.